Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 25th meeting of City Council. If I could have a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Councillor Burnett, the seconder. Councillor Young, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll start with the public notice, bylaws, and related reports. Councillor Dowell. Maybe we'll do the minutes first. Yeah. Motion to accept the minutes, please. Okay. Seconder for that? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now, Councillor Dowell.
Thanks very much. This is an application for road closure, a portion of road adjacent to 2210 Courtney Street. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder for that?
This is a very small piece of property that is needed for a utility. It is just off of 13th Avenue and Courtney Street, which is kind of in the hinterland. There is nothing around there. This will be or could be part of West Terra eventually, but this is not an interference whatsoever, and it is a partial road closure. We would seek concurrence, please.
Any comments on this report? I do have a question to the administration. It refers to, of course, the closure, but the sale of the land, and that's in the discussion section. So I'm just wondering, vendor, purchaser. I don't see this as a sale as much as a closure of the land. So.
To your worship, that's right. It's a closure, and it remains as a utility parcel for the city.
That's fine. Okay. Other comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have the bylaw. Councillor Young.
Thank you, your worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that bylaw number 2016-1 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, your worship. Council is now considering bylaw 216-1 respecting closure of a portion of land on Courtney Street. If there's anyone in the gallery this evening that wishes to address council on this matter, I would ask that you identify yourself at this time. There appears no one, your worship.
Thank you for that. I'll call the vote on the first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaw number 2016-1 be read a second time.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hinks, that council hereby consents to bylaw number 2016-1 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaw number 2016-1 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Young. We'll go to delegations and related reports in motion. We have our first delegation for this year, Lisa Coe from the Regina Humane Society. If you could come forward, identify who you are, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, your worship and members of Regina City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the renewal of the Spay and Neuter Program Services contract. My name is Lisa Cook, Executive Director of the Regina Humane Society. Joining me today is Regina Humane Society Director of Operations, Steve Battistolo. The Regina Humane Society provides an animal welfare shelter for neglected, abused, and abandoned animals, as well as investigation services to enforce the Animal Protection Act of Saskatchewan and the Criminal Code of Canada. These services are funded solely through public donations and self-generated income. The Society also provides contracted municipal impound and animal control services to the City of Regina on a fee-for-service basis. The most serious pet overpopulation care and control issues arise in neighborhoods with restricted access to education and veterinary care due to limited financial resources. Targeted, subsidized spay-neuter services have been proven to reduce dog and cat populations, shelter intake, and euthanasia, making spay-neuter incredibly cost-effective in addition to saving animal lives. The Regina Humane Society's efforts to stop the euthanasia of community homeless animals intensified in 2011 with the official launch of its spay and neuter clinic and a spay-neuter program providing subsidized pet spay and neuter surgeries to financially disadvantaged households and community animal rescue organizations with partial financial support from the City of Regina. The Regina Humane Society Spay and Neuter program operates under the regulations of care established by the Saskatchewan Veterinary Medical Association. In addition to the surgical procedures provided through the Spay and Neuter program, the Regina Humane Society assists low-income animal owners with application completion, income verification, and scheduling a sterilization procedure for their animal, perform a preliminary health screen of eligible animals in association with sterilization, provides animal owners with information about sterilizing the animal and on pre-surgery and post-surgery care, arranges to have animals transported and treated at the 24-hour animal care center at the expense of the Regina Humane Society for any after-hour surgical complications, and tattoos, microchips, and licenses all pets sterilized, not only ensuring fewer unwanted litters, but also that more animals than ever before can quickly and safely be returned to their owners. Since the inception of the low-income spay-neuter program in 2011, the number of homeless dogs and cats entering the shelter has decreased from 4,643 to 4,111 in 2015, an 11% decrease accounting for 532 less animals entering the shelter, despite one of the fastest-growing municipalities in Canada. Animal adoptions have increased from 1,875 in 2011 to 2,195 in 2015, with 2014 representing a record-breaking 2,308 animals adopted. The number of dogs and cats euthanized since 2011 has decreased by 41%, accounting for 724 less animals euthanized in 2015 alone. Community support for the program has been strong and awareness continues to grow. Supported by Regina Humane Society education and outreach initiatives such as the Pet Stop, the Pet Supply Training and Outreach Program, and North Central Community Animal Welfare, the Spay and Neuter program continues to cultivate strong relationships between the Regina Humane Society and communities with a high incidence of animal welfare challenges. The Regina Humane Society is proud to be able to share the successes already achieved with the City of Regina in the delivery of this important life-saving and cost-saving program. We respectfully seek your continued support of the program as part of our long-term animal services agreement with the City of Regina in the provision of animal control and impoundment services in a new animal community center for the City of Regina. A 10% increase in the spay and neuter services contract amount reflects inflationary costs since the inception of the program in 2011 in order to maintain affordability of the program to low-income pet owners in the future. The Society values its ongoing relationship with the City of Regina in the provision of quality animal programs and services which support the health, safety, and quality of life for people and animals in our community.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councilor Fundura.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, good to see you. This program involve feral cats?
Yes, it does. Part of the program involves a partial subsidy portion of the program where we partner with animal rescue groups in the community, including Regina Cat Rescue, who have cats sterilized under the partial subsidy portion of the program.
Thank you. Can you give me a personal story out of all these individuals that use the program? What would you pick one? Let me know.
There's many stories to tell. Certainly giving members of the community the opportunity to provide responsible pet care for their pets is something that is very worthwhile and certainly touching in many cases. One in particular comes to mind, someone who had recently lost their employment due to having to undergo cancer treatment over a long period of time, could not afford to have their animals sterilized, and this program provided that opportunity for them to microchip, tattoo, sterilize their animal, and that animal ended up being quite instrumental in the recovery period for that individual, and they were very grateful for the option to be able to have this provided to them.
Thank you for that, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fundura. Other speakers? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now look at the report. This is a report from Community Protective Services. Councilor Flagel.
Thank you. I rise in support of CR 16-2, and it's the renewal of animal spay and neuter program service contract that's already there. So that the Deputy City Manager be authorized to resolve the terms and conditions upon which the animal service agreement between the Regina Humane Society and City of Regina be amended to include the low-income spay and neuter program items as outlined in the report, and that the City Clerk be authorized to execute any definitive legal agreements after review by the city solicitor.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Hinks.
And that's it.
Okay. Speakers to the report. Pretty self-explanatory. I want to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We will now move on to our next delegation, Mr. Len Antonini. If you could identify yourself, who you represent, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. There may be questions afterwards.
Sure. My name's Len Antonini. I'm the Executive Director of Regina Minor Football. With me tonight is Kelly Hamilton, the President of Regina Minor Football 2008. We're here tonight to talk a little bit about Libel Field. It's been about 10 years since we first came to City Council with an idea to renovate Libel Field. Back then, we formed a partnership with soccer, the city, the provincial government, the federal government, and we put in new artificial turf, lights, and clock. We considered that phase one. We saw that it was good, but it wasn't enough for Regina Minor Football. We decided that we needed to put in bleachers, a press box, canteen, and a front entrance to continue on with Libel Field. So we raised the money for that and completed what we consider phase two, which turned out to be a gem in a gem of a place. Wascana Park is a gem in the city, and I think Libel Field is a gem within Wascana Park. But it's not complete. We're looking at phase three now, which would be a building out there. We'd like to build a building that would house our office and our storage for our equipment. But it would also include dressing room which are needed for Libel Field, classroom, a board of directors room, a deck, areas that any of the other sports that are played out in Wascana Park that could use, the softball, the tennis, cross-country skiing, cross-country running, all the different places could use this facility. I think once we got the facility built, it would enable those groups to go after provincial, national, and international events that that Libel Field would be able to host. Regina Minor Footballs, we've put pretty close to $2 million into Libel Field already. As of right now, we don't owe any money. That money's all been raised. We feel that the building would cost about pretty close to $3 million, but we have a building committee that's put together a business plan that that has ideas for sponsorship. We go out and raise the money and that type of stuff that would enable us to build the building ourselves. And then we have a budget in place that we'd be able to run the business or run the building on a day-to-day basis once it's done. We turn the building back, give it back to the city of Regina, so that to ensure that the public will always, have access to that building. I think that when you look at it, I think it's time that we completed it, and we're willing to do the work. So in conclusion, we ask that the City Council approve the recommendation put forward by the Community and Protective Services Committee contained in the Regina Minor Football Libel Field Facility Donation Agreement Report.
Thank you very much for your presentation. There may be questions from members of Council. Councilor Dowell.
Thanks very much. Evening, gentlemen. I have a number of questions for you. You referenced back 10 years ago, so in the beginning there was two organizations that came before council. One was Regina Minor Football and one was soccer. How's that relationship going now in terms of sharing the field?
The relationship with soccer is fine. Soccer uses a field from May. They get first choice on the field from May till July. We get first choice from from August till November, and then vice versa. We get second choice from April to July, and they get second choice from August to November. We do very well. We've worked together, working it out. Last year, the field was used 182 days. So we're getting a ton with over 20,000 athletes using the field and close to over 20,000 spectators watching the sports there. So our relationship with them is good right now.
Thank you. When you gentlemen took over Regina Minor Football, how many kids were playing and how many are playing now?
When I got involved in the year 2000, there was 425 kids playing organized football in the community. Last year, with the Mighty Mite program added to our Adam Peavy and Bantam division, We had the most kids in the history of the organization. So for more than 60 years, Regina Minor Football has been part of our community, and last year was record numbers.
And what was that?
More than 1,700 kids,
Thank you.
local kids.
Thank you. So I know that there are teams from outside of the city that get to use this. Can you give me a rundown maybe as to where other communities get involved here as well?
Yeah, we've had Weyburn, Estevan, Yorkton's still in the league, Lumsden, all the bedroom communities, Pilot Butte, Balgoni, a lot of them play. When we do our U16 program, we have kids from Swift Current, Moose Jaw, pretty well all over southern Saskatchewan use it with some of the programs. When you put all our programs together, our spring league, our U16 program, and our fall season, we have over 2,000 participants register each year.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the building that's proposed. So I think I heard you make reference to community use. What would you envision as community use? So could I have a board meeting if I'm the Lacrosse Association? Could I?
Yeah. When you take a look at it, there'll be rooms there that we'll use a boardroom. We'll have a classroom for our coaches' clinics and stuff like that. I think that anytime, even the cross country, when they do the run in the fall there, they use Leibel Field as a center for sports and stuff like that. There's the tennis courts, everything there. I think that there'll be lots of use for if they want to use it. We're going to be there, and we're more than willing to share it with all the communities, and including I think I must have said bird watchers or something on TV or something, because I've been getting mass harassment at the fire hall for that one. So even the bird watchers.
Well done, thank you. So maybe just tell me a little bit about storage of equipment, because I think that's part of the reason why you want to go in here.
Well, if you just go back a year, we had a bit of a scare with the company that was adjacent to us over on our storage facility on Winnipeg Street, and being both firefighters, everybody knows that the consequences of whether you have a small fire or an inconsequential fire. But we received significant damage, smoke and soot damage to over 2,000. We carry over 2,000 football helmets, 2,500 shoulder pads, all valued at close to $1 million of inventory. Had that fire gone on another 3 or 4 minutes, we probably would have lost that whole 1,300 block storage facility, the old GM plant. So I think that just kind of opened up our eyes to say, I think the time is, we looked at a 5-year kind of plan, and I think the time is now that we move into the new era and we move into Leibel Field and kind of get it to where it's more user-friendly from an organizational standpoint. It makes it a little bit easier for us to kind of transition this into the next, people that are going to be involved with minor football. But when you have that kind of significant amount of equipment, it takes a, good number of square footage to store it. In the off-season, we do lots of maintenance on all of the equipment, and we bring in user groups. And just the other night, we brought in the Regina Thunder to a helmet cleaning bee. Huge success, allows the local kids to get back to their grassroots level. And I think it's just time that we, kind of update our facilities out there to make it more football-oriented and community-oriented.
Thank you. It sounds to me from coaching clinics, cleaning and maintenance of equipment, board meetings, et cetera, you're going to be there an awful lot. Would that be accurate?
Very much so. I think, with my off-season work there, doing all the maintenance stuff, I'm there, if not every day, twice a day. And Lenny and our office staff, the number of kids that we have involved with minor football now, it's kind of taken that office program into more of a full-time criteria. So our presence out there would be pretty significant compared to what we've been in the past. And I think that's a good thing for the area out there.
Okay, thanks. I noticed that when you did lighting at Leibel Field, and of course the city with you, there was an offshoot to the ladies softball. Now I notice they're building a building as well. So has there been a ripple effect, do you think, from what you've tried to do to them?
Well, I think with regards to the softball people, without a doubt. And then I think it also enhanced the whole area with the boys fastball or hardball league. They started playing at the Ball Diamond on the north end of the facility. So we have seen a lot of the user groups out there really just kind of, maybe everybody's kind of picked up the pace, everything from cross-country running, the track there, to the tennis people. We just got an upgrade to the tennis courts out there. We got a new washroom facility, which is very thankful to the city for putting that in, and I think it's just that whole community, that athletic side to Wascana Center in the Douglas Park area it's a gem, and it needs another diamond in the gem.
Gotcha. Let's talk about money a little bit. So if someone wants to make a donation, I'm assuming, one, you'd accept a donation, but could you tell me how that's handled? So if I come to you with some money, what happens?
Yeah, we're going to be putting together some programs and some packages where people will be able to sponsor, maybe the board of directors room, that type of stuff. If people can donate as well personally. We do it through the National Sports Trust Fund. So anybody that donates personally, they get it's tax deductible and stuff like that. So pretty well any of that kind of thing. Anybody that wants to help us out, we've got we're looking for money all the time, and we're confident that we'll raise the money. Like I say, we do have a business plan and a budget in place that that's going to make it possible.
When some organizations get a donation, there's an administrative fee and there's other fees and so on. What kind of administrative fee do you have, by the way?
We've raised close to $2 million. All of it has gone towards Libel Field. We don't take any administration. We just raise the money. Like I think I told the councilors earlier that I like taking the money out of the guys' pockets, and I like donating it right to the kids in football.
Thank you. My last question, because this is part of Wascana Center as well. Have you had dealings with them, and are they acceptable to the notion you're presenting?
Very much so. We have made a number of preliminary reports to their Wascana Center and their advisory committee, and we're keeping them in tune with with all the latest changes to our floor plan, and right now we're working on a 3D and a sight line and a site plan. So we've taken it kind of to the next level now that our floor plan is 99% complete. So Bernadette McIntyre and Mike Mamona have been brought up to speed, at every moment that we have updates for them, and they've been very receptive and are very encouraging too.
Good, thank you. So I'll conclude with this. If you would just give me confirmation, you're willing to build a building up to $3 million in value the community can use, and you'll donate it to the city. Did I get that right?
You betcha.
Thank you.
What a deal. That's good. Councilor Hinks, you have some questions?
Yeah, first off, I'd like to congratulate you and thank you the way you've looked after the youth of Regina, and I'm getting to a question here. And also,
I'm sure you will be.
Also, tell you what a great job you've done with Libel Field. I've been out there a number of times, and I'm just in awe of what's been done there. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about the program. Like, it's different than most sports where you have an inclusionary thing where I know there's 12 men on, 12 off. If you could talk about that. And then I'd also like to talk about how it's a sport where all equipment is supplied and the cost for kids to play.
Actually, we've kept the cost down pretty good, Terry. We do supply all the equipment, the helmets, shoulder pads, and everything like that. We do a lot of things with the concussions. We're training our coaches to be better, those types of stuff. We continue to do our 12 on, 12 off, and we do a fair play where we actually police it too. We have guys on the sideline that make sure that the coaches adhere to the kids getting to play. So I think that I've taken a look at a lot of the organizations across Canada this past year, and we have more kids playing per capita than anybody, and I think it does have to do with our 12 on, 12 off fair play rules that we commit to.
Thank you for that. Now, I know Hockey Regina is in your office there too. Will they move with you too, or will they stay there?
I've talked to Hockey Regina. We talked about it at one time. I think that we get along great with them, and it would have been a nice touch. But with us moving to Libel Field, I think that the football itself, like it's more of a football place. I think that gave them an idea that they may take a look at moving into
Cooperators?
Cooperators is where they're thinking of doing it. We haven't stopped talk with them. Like we have a kind of an off season. Like their off season is our busy season, and their busy season. So there is still talk about that, and you know, we would probably entertain it, but right now we feel that we can do it on our own, and I talked to them actually the other day and said that they're more than welcome to come out there and use the boardroom or whatever if they want to, if they need to.
Is there anything else that you'd like to brief all of us on council about your program and what you do, or a question that hasn't been asked?
Well, the only thing that I'd like to say is that as executive director of Regina Minor Football, we have a board of directors of about 16 people that have been around. We've got people on the board that have been there for 15 years, 10 years, 5 years. A lot of them, most of them don't have kids playing anymore. They're there for the right reasons. I think we do a lot of things right, and I think that's why we're capable of raising this kind of money, and fortunate that we have these board members to do the work.
Well, again, I'll be supporting what we're doing here, and I congratulate you on everything you do, and I don't have a question.
I noticed, Councilors. Thank you for that. Other questions? I have one, and it's a great model, business model, no question about that. With respect to the Soccer Association, the report, at least we have in front of us, speaks primarily, almost exclusively of minor football in this process. Is the Soccer Association working with you as well?
We're not working with them right now on the building because we feel that the building is we're looking at it as our office and our storage for equipment. So again, a lot of they do play lots at Libel Field, but they have office space. They have everything already. So for us to ask them to come, to donate to it, we feel that we can do it ourselves. And so, but I was in their office the other day talking about booking and stuff, and we're fine with them the way we're doing it right now, and our relationship with them is as good as it was 5 years ago.
Excellent. Thank you for that. No other questions? You can return to the gallery. Thank you very much, and we'll now look at the report. Councillor Flagel on the Libel Field agreement.
And I rise in support of this too. It's CR 16-3, and it's Regina Minor Football and Libel Field Facility Donation Agreement. The City Council authorized the Executive Director of City Services to negotiate and approve the terms of a construction agreement between Regina Minor Football Association and the City of Regina for construction of a change room, storage, classrooms, meeting facilities at Libel Field, the existing place. City Council to authorize the Executive Director of City Services to negotiate and approve the terms of a donation and operation and maintenance agreement between Regina Minor Football Association and the City of Regina for donations and long-term operating maintenance of Libel Field facilities by Regina Minor Football Association.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Hinks. Okay. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Dowell.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, to 10 years ago when Regina Minor Football and Regina Soccer Association came together. And the idea at that time was it was unique, not ever had soccer and football come before that I'm aware of in anywhere in Canada. And what happened from there was that not only the city administration and the council of the day, but the provincial and federal government said this is a very good idea and invested money. Now, when I stood up at that time and asked for support for this notion, it was because I felt this is the way that we must do business in the future, that we must have partnerships, we must have organizations come together, share either facility, 183 days is what I heard, and make sure that things could happen. What's really interesting to me now is last year we heard from many of the cultural groups who are now banding together and looking how they can share facilities and so on. Other people have looked at this organization to see how it can be done well. I'm going to remind you of what we're being asked for. They're going to give the city a facility, a building where they'll obviously have lots of business going on, but it's open for other community organizations. I said community. I didn't say sport. It is for many people to use. So again, I say, if this is the way business is to be done, then these people are leading the pack. Wascana Center is on board because they're saying from an exterior point of view and fitting into the area, having many people in and out of that part of the park as a benefit. We see it for benefit because it will affect the whole park. Ladies softball, track and field, our staff have invested other money to make sure that there are other facilities there and more improvements will follow. And I point out the parking lot as being one of the really high points. I want to address one other thing. You note that when people give money to the organization, it goes directly to the kids. Isn't that what we want? Further to that, it must be a reasonable occurrence if all of a sudden 4 times as many kids are playing in the last 15 years. We talk about regional approaches. Look how many cities are welcome to come in here and play in our community. And we have people that want to donate because we know the kids are looked after. This is the way it's to be done. Please support.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be brief. Councillor O'Donnell has eloquently stated the essential points. I think I would like to thank the Regina Minor Football Club for its support of youth, for its building of civic pride, for its working with other organizations across the city, for all that it does to us. But I also want to note this, in a slight digression. Both gentlemen that appeared before us tonight as a delegation are active firefighters. Regina firefighters this past week have had a busy week, and I think the city owes them, to the whole fire department, a debt of gratitude. I'll be happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Hinks? You okay? Okay, Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, the work that you're doing for the children is absolutely fantastic. And the fact that you have so many coming is just wonderful. So that's at the top of the list. But the fact that you're also offering rooms for people in the community to use is really important, because that's in Ward 1, and there aren't any other community buildings in Ward 1 where people can schedule meetings. So it's going to really relieve some of the pressure we have in Ward 1. And just as a sidebar, bird watching is great. It actually tracks the birds, and it can identify environmental threats. And and bird watchers spent $32 billion U.S. in the North American economy in this last year. Thank heavens for Google.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Okay. Oh, you're going to close debate, though. Just any other speakers? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks to your presentation. And a quick question for administration. When I hear that this field is used 182 days in a year, to me that sounds like probably about every nice day in Regina it's used, every day that there's not snow on the turf. I'm just wondering if we have any sense of the capacity of this, as far as when the city might need another facility like this. Certainly, when we think of bang for buck, investing in recreational facilities and active things for people to be active with, this certainly seems like a great deal for our city, and certainly minor football is something we should all be proud of. Does anyone have a sense of when Regina might be ready for another field like Leibel Field? First question. And number two, where would we think of putting that? At the same location, or would it go in another area of the city? Thanks.
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, through the work of the refresh of the rec facility plan, which is going to take place in 2016 and 17, it will be determined what additional facilities, if any, will be required to meet the demand. And at that time, it would also be determined in what location they would be going.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers before we have closing of debate? Councillor Flagel?
Okay, thanks. Definitely rise in support in this, but the question is, financially, what is it going to cost the city of Regina to have this building put up?
Zero, I think. Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, pardon me, nothing.
Zero?
Zero.
That's a nice number. I heard the delegation say $3 million to build this facility, and it's costing the city zero. How much did it cost us to build the existing Leibel Field as it sits today?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Shaley.
Ms. Shaley?
Your Worship, in the past 5 years, between the city, Regina Minor Football, Regina Soccer Association, and the federal and provincial governments, we've invested more than $6 million in the facility. So that includes both Leibel Field as well as the recently constructed support building.
Do we know what our portion is, though?
Ms. Shaley?
Your Worship, the city's portion is about $2.5 million, so that would include $2.1 million for the support building, and our contribution to the Leibel Field upgrade was about $400,000.
Okay. I've also been told that maintenance on these types of facilities, comparative to other grass facilities, is like 10 to 1. Is that true? Like, obviously, we don't have to cut grass. Obviously, we don't have to water. We can use it more. There's no damage. Is that sort of an accurate, on the maintenance side, is that sort of an accurate number?
Mr. Onright?
Through your worship, yes, it is.
So 1 in 10. So that's pretty phenomenal. And I want to thank the two gentlemen that came forward. Mr. Hamilton wasn't here, and I think Mr. Antonini took a couple of shots at him when he wasn't here. So just so you know that, just so things are good. So anyway, I'm full support of this. This is now the second organization that's come forward in front of this council offering money. You don't see that very often. The UPass, the students came forward with money. Regina Minor Football is coming forward with money to build a better city. I applaud that. The partnerships are great. We'll bring them on, bring it forward some more. I think the next field, Councillor Fraser, if it doesn't go there, will go somewhere close, because you're building a hub, as they said. It's sort of another gem that we put this whole piece of, the cake is now almost all there. Baseball, I heard, was also going to utilize Douglas Park. But once you got a nucleus of a building and a structure like that, the City of Regina has done some asphalting in the area, washrooms, facilities. Douglas Park track is becoming a better and better facility. Huge, huge for Wascana Park. So I'll be full support. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. You've closed debate, so there's no further speakers. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. So we'll move on to our next subject, which is the blue dot motion that you have, Councillor Fraser. And I want to just, we've never had a delegations for a motion. Usually they're for reports. So with the indulgence of council, I'm going to ask Councillor Fraser to introduce the motion. If we have a seconder, to not speak to the motion, allow the delegations to have their say, and then we enter debate after that. Are members of council in agreement with that? A bit different than usual, but we're going to have a chance to get this motion on the floor. Councillor Fraser, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, very pleased and excited to rise for a motion in regards to the right to a healthy environment. So the City of Regina Declaration, proposed by the Regina Blue Dot Movement, is a document that aspires to publicly recognize all citizens' inherent right to a healthy environment. Although the declaration would be non-binding, it would assist Council in the assessment of potential impacts to development activities on our community. Over 1,400 people, many of whom are here tonight, from Regina have endorsed the petition supporting this declaration. Currently, there's 107 Canadian municipalities that have endorsed similar declarations, and that number is growing by the month. More than 10 million people in Canada now live in communities that have affirmed their right to clean air, safe water and food, a stable climate, and a say in decisions that affect their well-being. Other provincial and territory capitals, such as Victoria, St. John's, Charlottetown, Halifax, Yellowknife, Whitehorse, and Toronto, have also passed such declarations. Having the City of Regina support this declaration could work in conjunction with our support of the recent Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Canadian Big City Mayors Climate Change Action Plan, Partners for Climate Protection. I'd also like to add to that it would also be in line with recent sustainability initiatives at our University of Regina. And certainly, we've heard from the federal government that there's likely to be some infrastructure stimulus money coming, and there's a very good chance that that'll be tied to green infrastructure. So I think this would greatly, having this conversation now and endorsing this declaration would help us prepare to apply for that, no doubt, limited funding. Regina can show its support for the Blue Dot Movement and demonstrate its leadership in environmental sustainability by adopting its own declaration recognizing the right to a healthy environment. This is a public pronouncement that the City of Regina cares about the environment and the health of its residents, affirming our commitment to building a healthy and sustainable city. So now if I may proceed with the actual motion. Whereas the City of Regina understands that people are part of the environment and that a healthy environment is inextricably linked to the well-being of our community, and whereas all people should have the right to a healthy environment, including the right to breathe clean air, the right to drink clean water, the right to consume safe food, the right to access nature, the right to know how pollutants and contaminants released into their local environment, about pollutants and contaminants released in their own local environment, and the right to participate in decision-making that will affect the environment. And whereas the City of Regina has the responsibility within its jurisdiction to respect, protect, and fulfill and promote these rights, and whereas when threats of serious and irreversible damage to human health or the environment exist, the City of Regina shall take cost-effective measures to prevent the degradation of environment and to protect the health of its citizens. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Regina shall specify objectives, targets, timelines, and actions that it will take within its jurisdiction to fulfill residents' right to a healthy environment, including priority actions to ensure infrastructure and development projects protect the environment, document, protect, and prioritize green infrastructure, such as city trees, document current greenhouse gas emission estimates and identify areas where emissions can potentially be reduced, responsibly increase density, prioritize walking, cycling, and public transit as preferred modes of transportation, ensure adequate infrastructure for the provision of safe and accessible drinking water, reduce solid waste and promote recycling and composting, establish and maintain quality accessible green spaces in all residential neighborhoods. Be it further resolved that the City of Regina will consult with its residents as part of this process. Be it further resolved that the City of Regina shall review these objectives, targets, timelines, and actions every 5 years and evaluate progress towards fulfilling this declaration. Finally, be it further resolved that the City of Regina, recognizing the crucial role of other levels of government play in providing a healthy environment, send letters of support to the provincial government and to the federal government, encouraging them to develop provincial and federal legislation that supports all people's right to live in a healthy environment. Thank you.
Have a seconder for that, please? Councilor Fendera. Okay, so we will suspend debate by members of council, and we'll now go to delegations first. The first delegation I have is D16-3, Josh Campbell. Mr. Campbell, if you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, then maybe questions afterwards.
Thank you. Greetings, Mayor Fagier and Regina City Council members, especially Councillor Fraser and Councillor Hinks. Good to see you. First of all, I'm sorry I don't have any money, but I came to offer my opinion. I'm here on behalf of the Blue Dot Movement. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. My name is Josh Campbell. Though I'm a high school teacher in the Regina Schools Catholic School District, what I'm about to say does not necessarily reflect the views of my division. However, if you read the current Saskatchewan science curriculum, you would see that what we are asked to teach falls completely in line with much of what I'm about to say. First of all, if you were to sit on any high school environmental science class under the core outcome atmosphere and human health, you would, quote, investigate the effects of a changing climate on society and the environment, end quote. Within this, you would most likely discuss NASA's recent statement saying 2015 was globally the hottest year on record, and that the last 15 of 16 years combined have also been the hottest on record. Yes, recycling is very important, but is there more we can do? Figuring out what to do can seem daunting. One answer that has been chosen by 110 other Canadian municipalities is to join a grassroots movement spearheaded by the David Suzuki Foundation. Now it's our turn to decide. A declaration on a right for Regina citizens to healthy water, soil, and air is not only important for Saskatchewan citizens, but a vital step towards putting actions to the words that we give our youth every day in schools. Think about it. Say tomorrow I go into a grade 9 science class and teach about the importance of tackling issues such as contamination of soils in English River, the lack of access to clean drinking water on 90% of Saskatchewan's First Nation reserves, and the serious design issues of our effort to capture carbon in Estevan. Then in the next breath, I tell them that the Regina City Council just turned down a motion to declare every citizen's right to clean air, water, and soil. Eyes glazed over. Sadly, this is nothing new for them. In fact, students don't even bat an eye anymore. Very rarely will one speak up and say, "Why us? We aren't adults. We can't vote. Adults and governments are supposed to lead us. Where are they?" But alas, no one raises a stink. By high school, they already get it. I try to be optimistic and say every individual can still make a difference. And so, Regina City Council, I ask that you would have the moral leadership to surprise my students, the guts to join a movement that makes us accountable to the environmental health of our communities. So far, the only municipality to sign in Saskatchewan is Davidson, which now has something even better than its teen burgers. If Regina came on board, it would definitely lend critical mass to such a movement in our province. I realize that there are questions and that adopting any type of declaration should bring about reflection. Thus, I respect Council's need to deliberate and think through such implications. But on this point, I would like to cite the words of Pope St. Francis in his most recent encyclical, Laudate Si. How can a society plan and protect its future amid constantly developing technological innovations? One authoritative source of oversight and coordination is the law, which lays down rules for admissible conduct in the light of the common good. There is a growing jurisprudence dealing with the reduction of pollution by business activities. But political and institutional frameworks do not exist simply to avoid bad practice, but also to promote best practice, to stimulate creativity in seeking new solutions, and to encourage individual or group initiatives." End quote. I realize that the Pope doesn't speak for all of us, but that the leader of one of the largest global religions is speaking with such moral authority on this topic is very telling. What he is saying is that it's not enough for us as individuals to set limits and encourage best ecological practice. It's not enough for me to ask each of my students to solve this problem. No. What we need is to set collective and societal environmental norms that we agree upon both at local and national levels. Exactly what the Blue Dot movement is striving for. Once again, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councilor Dowell.
Evening. Thanks for coming forward and sharing your thoughts. I'm going to preface what I'm going to ask you by telling you I'm a practical guy, so I have to deal in practicality a little bit. One of the cities that was mentioned in the motion, I visited at Christmas time. There's a raging debate about whether they should continue to dump raw sewage into the ocean or not. And while there seems to be some desire to do that, it seems that there's a lot of people opposed. What does that say about that community?
I'm sorry, can you, what's your question exactly?
So they have signed on to the Blue Dot movement, in my view, are not practicing what they've signed up for. In other words, dumping raw sewage in the ocean to me is really not a great thing.
I would agree with you.
Okay. But do you understand my practicality concern, and that is if I sign but don't do?
Yeah.
I have to understand.
No, I can totally appreciate what you're saying, and I think that I can't speak for that, what's going on there, but if we were to adopt some declaration, I hope that we would have more accountability to that than what's happening there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dowell. Other, Councilor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Josh. You know, the home and school are the first places where children learn to appreciate the environment and to be responsible for the environment. Mm-hmm. So I'm really pleased that you mentioned the science grade 12, not grade 12, the whole science curriculum. Are you aware of the official community plan as that it could be a resource to that science curriculum? I don't know whether you've seen a copy of that official community plan.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No, sorry.
It has all 5 of the policy areas that we're now moving forward on in the environment, and I would think that the city might make that available to science teachers who would like to use that in their classroom. Mm-hmm. And I would bet you there's people in the city who might even want to come out to the classrooms and talk to the children. So thank you for bringing up schools
that's a great
and science
suggestion.
curriculum.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Councilor Hawkins?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Josh, for coming forward. I want to ask you a question which seems a little bit abstract, but it has concrete practicality. In terms of promoting good environmental practices, safe environments in cities and in the countryside, who do you think is best able to do that job? And by that I mean, do you want that policy issue dealt with by elected representatives of the people? Would you rather have it dealt with somewhere else?
I would think that it should be addressed on all levels, just given the circumstances of what's happening now. I'm not sure if there is something as such a healthy environment advisory group that's tasked especially with looking at some of the ways that practical things can be implemented into a municipality, but I would think that would be another good way to look at it. Obviously, I mentioned schools, and that's a really important place. I think, I don't know if you're getting at when you mentioned this shouldn't be something that's legislated from the top down. Is that what you're questioning, or?
What I'm wondering is this, and you may correct me on this, but my understanding of the Blue Dot movement is its ultimate goal is to place into the Charter of Rights a right to a healthy environment. That's my understanding. If that's my understanding, it would also be my understanding that unelected judges would in fact be making environmental policy. And what I'm asking you is it your preference to have environmental policy made by elected officials who can be voted out if they don't do a good job, or made by judges from whom there's little recourse?
From my understanding of the reason for the eventual goal of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms making an amendment there is because there was certain victories environmentally that Dr. David Suzuki obtained with a groups of people in the early 80s or 70s, but then those decisions were reversed again. And so depending on which government came in, it all was relative. And so the idea was, could there be something put into the charter that would actually protect people no matter which government's in power, no matter who's making decisions, that there's just insurance that those protections are in place. So I think to answer your question, yes, it is important that there is some kind of legal structure that has teeth that can protect individual citizens' right to a healthy environment. And I mean, that's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about a declaration. But as an eventual goal, I can see why that would be important.
And as a final follow-up, Your Worship, what happens if you enshrine it in the Charter and your judges don't happen to be environmentalists and make the wrong kinds of decisions?
Well, I don't know if I'm in a position to answer that question. I think that you would hope that those people that we've placed in those positions they're going to take that into consideration, that this is an important right for people, and that, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, what if it's not there? Then it doesn't matter. We are where we're at right now. Whereas at least if you have something in the charter there, then at least there's a chance that let me give you a practical example. In English River in Saskatchewan, the people up there who are moose hunting and have done it for years, they're finding traces of sorry, it's slipping my mind. What's the element?
Lead, cyanide?
Yeah, my mind's not doing well here. But anyways, the same stuff that they're making weapons out of.
Lead?
Uranium, thank you. They're finding traces of uranium in the moose, so they can no longer do that hunting. So this would allow those people an opportunity to take their case towards a court and say this is what's happening, whereas now what power do they have to actually challenge what's happening in those communities like that? Sorry, that slipped my mind, but yeah.
No, it's a fair answer.
Yeah.
I suppose the people might consider electing different lawmakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. Other speakers? Other questions? I have one, and I'm wondering if you can speak to, there is clearly a lobby for municipal governments across Canada, which is evidenced by the motion and by what you're saying. Is the Blue Dot movement also speaking to the federal government and to provinces as well?
Again, I could be corrected here by Kelly or someone else who comes up next, but from my understanding, the idea is to speak to municipalities first and then from there, it's kind of a grassroots movement, so start at a small level of government and then build up from there as only interest gathers at those smaller levels first. Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that. No other ones to ask questions. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yvette Crane, if you could come forward, identify yourself. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you. Your Worship, the Mayor and members of City Council, I'm here to speak about the right to a healthy environment. My name is Yvette Crane, and I have been a member of the Regina Blue Dot Movement since its founding in early 2015. I know a lot of people in Regina. I'm involved in a lot of areas. Every person I've spoken to about this idea is in support. While the declaration before you is non-binding, it's an important first step that we hope will eventually lead to environmental rights being enshrined as a human right in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This exists in a number of other countries in the world and has been used where needed to challenge particular environmental issues. Other speakers will be able to speak to that more specifically. One community, one city, and one province at a time, we are making this happen. I'm proud to be part of the Regina community, where people who care deeply about local issues and the environment come together to work on these. In one short year, the Regina Blue Dot Movement has become a community, holding meetings, community events, children's activities, and we've joined in with other community agencies such as the Regina Farmers Market and the Cathedral Village Arts Festival. We meet, educate, and interact with the public. Over 1,400 people have signed on to pledge their support, and lots of people are here tonight, which is terrific. I've been involved with a lot of community projects and initiatives in the past. An example is when the Regina Environmental Group got glass recycling going in the city in the early 1990s. At that time, there was limited opportunity to recycle any materials. Now we have door-to-door pickup of our recyclables, thanks to the City of Regina. Like recycling, this declaration of the right to a healthy environment is an idea whose time has come. So let's lead the way. Another thing I want to mention to you is that we have a whole group of enthusiastic, energetic, and passionate young people who have become involved in this, and you'll see many of them here and hear from them. And I'm very excited as the middle generation of environmentalists to have these young people coming up behind and taking over is a nice thing to see and great for our city. And in fact, most of them are the leaders of this movement. The rest of us are helping out behind the scenes. And it's because a healthy environment is something that all citizens can get behind, can understand, support, and work together on. I urge you to support the passing of this declaration here tonight. Let's join with the 90,000 citizens in 110 municipalities across Canada who have already signed on, recognizing our right to fresh air, clean water, and healthy food. This will be a powerful, positive step for our citizens and our city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Good evening. You used the phrase non-binding, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I want you to correct me. It would seem to me by saying that you look at this as being aspirational, and that somewhere along the way, in the future, it becomes a little bit more specific or more defined. Would I be accurate?
I would say yes.
Okay. Do you wish to elaborate on that at all? Because the word non-binding versus binding, in the political stream, means different things. So you're okay with, as it words right now, with the understanding that it would take a while for this to take effect?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Yvette, for showing up this evening. I'm just wondering, you've been involved with the Blue Dot movement, and I think the previous speaker had mentioned that they understand that we as council need some time to reflect, understand, we have kind of, I guess, a best practice for business process that we don't want to just sign a document without understanding fully the financial implications, legal implications, policy. Have you had discussions with the other communities that have signed the document? Have they experienced any unforeseen sort of circumstances?
I haven't specifically, but Kelly Huzak is here, who's kind of the lead for our group, and she might have more information on that.
Okay.
If you want to ask her when she comes up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Being probably one of the older members of council, too, that I just want to say, I think the environmental movement is making great progress. I look back and when I got into the workforce in the 70s, and it was probably non-existent almost, but over the last number of years that I know just some of the documents I don't know, have you had a chance to recognize the city was awarded actually an award for kind of a level 5 category from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for its update on greenhouse gas emission, and that was started 25 years ago back in '89. And I just want to know if your movement has had an opportunity to look at many of the initiatives that are going forward.
We are aware of some of the initiatives, definitely, yeah, and I read with interest about the greenhouse gas emissions. I wasn't familiar with that specifically until recently when it was in the media.
I think it's been very positive. And as Councillor Young had mentioned earlier, our new official community plan really is digging down deeper into a lot of our master plans, and highly recommend taking a look at that. But
definitely.
Even that last is just progress. We still have to build upon and move forward, so I certainly understand. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other questioners? Thank you. You can return to the gallery and move on to our next delegation. This is Julian Weatherspoon. If you could as well identify yourself, who you represent, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
Thank you so much. Your Worship, the Mayor, and members of City Council, thank you for giving me a few moments to speak today, also in support of this proclamation of environmental rights. The general concept of a right to a healthy environment, I feel like, is such an obvious one that many of the people I speak to about the movement and what we're trying to accomplish actually assume that that's something we already have. And, just like 110 other countries do, which has also been mentioned. So clean air, fresh water, healthy food, they're easily taken for granted, especially in a place like Regina where we have all of those things. But we know by the number of Canadian and Saskatchewan communities with unsafe drinking water. We know by the growing frequency and severity of air quality warnings in Canadian cities. We know by the drought conditions of last summer that led to so much upheaval in Saskatchewan in the north with the fires that we can't take this for granted forever. We can't not act and just assume that the environment will be able to sustain us for generations to come as we're going right now. As was mentioned and by the Council and by other speakers, there are a number of ways that the City of Regina does really well. When I asked my 6-year-old what he would like me to address today, he mentioned our green spaces. We live not 2 blocks away from Wascana Park, and it's absolutely instrumental in the education of my children. At the point where we're at right now, Wascana Park is their science class. They're bird watchers. We've seen great horned owls. We've seen goldfinches. We've seen any number of different animals, and they're busy tracking them and learning about them and documenting them in their own little 6- and 2-year-old way. But it's really obvious when you watch them that they intrinsically understand the connection between themselves and our environment. If we don't have a healthy environment, we don't have healthy people. We don't have healthy citizens. They recognize that. And what I'm asking you today is that you recognize that by accepting this proclamation and by taking steps towards a more sustainable and a stronger city. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Ms. Witherspoon, for coming forward and taking a few questions. You brought up a really good point here around the boil water advisory, and that has occurred numerous times in our province, happens quite often in smaller communities, and again, sometimes these things happen because there's no controls or there's something that happens beyond the control of the operators. What do you feel would be Blue Dot's expectation if those communities had this proclamation in place? They've got a boil water advisory, something went wrong. What's the expectation of Blue Dot? What would the overarching response be?
So to speak to the legal questions that were sort of mentioned before within that, I feel like what a right to a healthy environment really gives us is it gives citizens a legal avenue to approach these things that happen. So, there's an accountability, maybe with stronger environmental impact studies, those kinds of things, regulating what happens, especially around something as crucial as our water supply. One would hope that you could prevent that kind of situation, and one would hope that you could force solutions. There's communities who have been decades under these advisories. That's just not acceptable. And so perhaps more legal recourse for people living under those conditions is what's needed.
Okay, I appreciate that. I guess I'm thinking about from our standpoint, City of Regina, we're fortunate we haven't had that, touch wood. Something happened that goes beyond our control. We had a major storm event with torrential flooding and all kinds of activity that we weren't prepared for or didn't have the ability to be prepared for. 100-year storm that pushed us to a situation where we found ourselves like that. Giving that legal right then to people to look for some kind of recourse against the city?
Well, I'm not sure that, things that are out of your ability to control, like a huge storm, is one thing. I feel like your policies in regards to approaching problems and situations can be really informed by something like, just keeping a certain set of rights at the front of your mind when you're approaching solutions. So, it's hard to speak to any sort of specific occurrence without, again, having prepared, but for that. But I feel like having, I guess, a guide and recognizing that connection is what I'm really looking for on a municipal level, is that we recognize that the decisions we make in this room have impact on people's health and have impact on the environment around us, and how can we do positive things within that.
So this council and this administration and the day-to-day operation of the decisions we make, you want us to make decisions that are the best of our ability within the budgets we have available to work with?
Absolutely. And with these things in mind, I'm sure you already do make the best decisions that you can with what you have at the moment. And what we're giving is just a new declaration to add a piece to the puzzle when you're thinking about approving something or when you're thinking about solving a certain kind of problem. I think we would just like assurance that these things are being thought about in that process.
Have you read any of the reports that we have that come before us? And again, not specific ones, but just reports, and saw where it says environmental impacts on our reports. So you're aware that we do review those already? Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation, Kelly Husak. If you could tell us your name, who you represent. You as well have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kelly Husak, and I'm an organizer here with the Regina Blue Dot Movement. As a lifelong citizen of the City of Regina, it brings me great honor to be able to stand in front of you all tonight. As you may already know, the Blue Dot Movement is a national grassroots initiative with the end goal of calling for an environmental Bill of Rights and ultimately amending the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to include its citizens' right to a healthy environment. With this right, Canadians would be guaranteed access to the basic necessities in order to sustain life: clean air, water, and food. As others have stated tonight, in my conversations over the past year, almost every individual I speak to believes that Canadians already have this right. This does not surprise me because 85% of Canadians believe we should have this right, and 98% of Canadians believe that nature is essential to human survival. In fact, over 110 nations across the world already recognize their citizens' right to live in a healthy environment. Unfortunately, Canada is a part of a small minority of countries that have been left behind on the front of environmental rights. Today, as you decide on the proposed motion, please keep in mind that this is an incredible opportunity for the City of Regina to affirm that democratic rights and health in regards to the environment are of concern and a priority for the City of Regina. I want to commend the City on its diligent work in aim of sustainability and safe development. There is no denying that immense work has been done in recent years, and it excites me to witness changes as we move forward. Environmental rights are ultimately issues of citizen rights. By amending the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to include a citizen's right to a healthy environment, protection can be put in place for all Canadians, but especially our most vulnerable populations. Weak environmental laws put all Canadians at unnecessary risk, and stronger environmental laws would mean better enforcement of existing laws, protection for vulnerable populations, including future generations, and enhanced public participation in decision-making. Many do not realize, but the right to a healthy environment is recognized under international law. What is important to know is that enforcement falls onto nations. Since this movement began in the fall of 2014, municipality after municipality have passed declarations in support of every Canadian's right to live in a healthy environment, and 10 million Canadians now live in cities and communities that affirm this right. We have already witnessed this movement begin to make headway in our neighbor province of Alberta. This is a major issue that calls for major action at all levels of government. With one province already looking to pass provincial legislation in support of the Blue Dot Initiative, let us make the conscious decision that Regina will stand with international law and the already 108 Canadian municipalities that have passed declarations in support of environmental rights in Canada. Passing of the declaration in question tonight is yet another step that the City of Regina can make in committing to creating a more attractive and sustainable community for Regina residents, as outlined in the City of Regina vision statement. Thank you, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions? Councilor Burnett.
Just following up, the other question she referred to is just if you've had conversations with the other 108 and if there's any feedback you're getting in terms of if they experienced any unforeseen issues, especially in terms of finance, legal, policy-related, political-related by signing.
I'm not aware of any in particular. I coordinate through a national leader of this movement who's stationed in Victoria. Each declaration for each municipality looks different depending on the needs of that municipality. We first were given a model municipal declaration in which we worked with Sean Fraser to develop and kind of tailored to the needs of the City of Regina, recognizing that you guys already do a lot of work in many of these areas.
Okay. When did the movement actually get started? So these 108 that signed on, has it just been recently within the last year or so that they've?
Yeah, just over. The first one in which was passed was in October of 2014, if I remember correctly. And then in 2015 is where we saw the most. And now 4 have been passed since the beginning of January.
No, appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Burnett. Councilor Fraser.
Thank you thanks a lot for your presentation and all your hard work. You've been involved with this for, you said, since last spring or so?
Yes.
Can you just walk us through how you first came to be involved? Thanks.
So I volunteered with the Blue Dot Tour when it came across Canada here in Regina. With that, I helped out at the event and kind of was inspired to take charge in this movement here in Regina. So myself and some other interested individuals got together and formed our group, and it's just taken effect from there.
Okay. How's it been so far? You've put in lots of hours. Is it fun, hard work? What's it like? Thanks.
Yes, I spend my evenings and weekends doing this, whether that's keeping up to date on the Facebook page, staying up to date on what's going on in the city and news. We've put on 2 events here in the city for community members to take part in, to learn a bit more about environmental rights and what that would mean here in Regina. We also attend various events throughout the city, whether that's Wings Over Wascana, like mentioned earlier, the Cathedral Village Arts Festival, and different like-minded organizations in that sense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you a reflective thought that I'd like you to comment on. So my question is, I asked one of the previous delegations about non-binding and so on. Are you clear about what that would mean? Is it aspirational for you as well?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. So you understand that even if it passed in a non-binding form, that there's much time and effort that would have to go into this. You understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Both you and a previous delegation made some positive comments about what we already do in the city. I want to thank you for that first. So I'm of mixed view. Mixed view is that, so are we okay in Regina, but we just need a group mass so that we can affect other people? Or do we have problems in Regina? I'm not sure of what I'm being told. It sounds to me like we're pretty good, but we need you to be part of a larger group. That's what I think.
Yes, yeah, I would say that is correct. This declaration essentially would show your support for both the provincial and federal environmental bills of rights in which we hope to achieve. There is one action item, I believe, in the motion where you guys would write a letter to the various governments in support of that. And so, yeah, this movement acts as kind of a shift in consciousness that we're seeing in our society. We're moving away from not just kind of disregarding the environment at all our decisions. So having this declaration would mean that it would be put in the forefront of our minds, stating that with every decision that we make, we do take into account the environment, whether that is positive or negative, and some decisions do have to be made based on what is within that capacity for those municipalities, kind of like you alluded to earlier in terms of the dumping of raw sewage.
Okay.
Every situation is specific and has its own circumstances that come along.
Thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Councilor Young.
Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for the information. I just want to clarify what I think I heard. You can craft your declaration to fit your city and what you would like it to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be the one that we have before us this evening. Is that correct?
Yep, and we would be willing to work with the city on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Kelly, for coming forward. I need some clarity as well. I understood what you said to be that the motion you're asking us to pass is aspirational, a declaration. But I also heard you say that part of the movement of which this motion will be a part is to enshrine a right to safe environment in the Charter. The latter is not declarational. It's legal and has serious legal implications, good or bad. There's serious legal implications. Which is it? Is this just aspirational, or is this legal as well?
Well, at the municipal and community levels, it would be aspirational. For at the provincial and the federal government level of getting an environmental bill of rights, that would be legally binding.
And would the declarations, the aspirational declarations passed by municipalities be used in support of the effort federally to include the right to a safe environment in the Charter?
Correct.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. Other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation, answering questions. Move on to our next delegation, Brian Brunskill. If you could identify yourself as well, who you represent. You as well have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Your Worship, the Mayor, members of City Council, thanks very much for allowing me to speak to you. I'm here to show my support for this motion with the efforts of the Blue Dot movement. My name is Brian Brunskill. I'm a business person and have operated a professional practice in the city here since 1984. When I first read this proposed declaration, I was immediately supportive, of course, thinking who wouldn't want this? We all have families we want to protect, and we want to have access to healthy green spaces. Pretty basic stuff. I think that most people share this point of view. However, putting on my business hat, one of the concerns that arose for me was how making such a declaration such as this now, how could that potentially tie the hands of future decision makers? I've thought carefully about this, and in my opinion, now as a resident and a business person, I'm even more supportive of the declaration. Effectively, having this declaration informs those who wish to conduct themselves or their interests in a way that unnecessarily contaminates our air or water or food is just unacceptable. As a community, why would we go there? Why would we allow that knowingly? This declaration simply raises the bar a bit right up front. There are regulations that limit emissions, of course, but making a public statement like this lets everyone know what our minimum standards are. For example, if there was a business opportunity in Regina that was being explored by a number of developers, this declaration would provide a means to help sort between those developers based upon the business plans which either respects the spirit of this declaration or it does not. As a community, are we not more likely to support and welcome the developer who respects the spirit of the declaration than those who do not? Some of the points in this declaration are already being addressed, of course, and I'd like to compliment our city on their efforts with curbside recycling, significant upgrades to our wastewater treatment facilities, conservation of our elms, and Regina's participation in the Big City Mayor's Action Plan, the Partners for Climate Change. These are all very important initiatives. As our city continues to grow, and with that growth, the increasing responsibility to know and understand the environmental consequences of our actions, this declaration will provide a firm baseline, just a baseline, on which to consider the legal, financial, and policy implications of future developments. So I'd like to respectfully encourage you all to support this motion. Personally, I see no downside, only an action today that supports a healthy environment for our children, their children, and future generations, letting them know that we were thinking about their right to a healthy environment in which to grow and prosper too, as most of us have here. Regina could be the 108th community in Canada and the 8th provincial or territorial capital to have a declaration. Thank you. I'd be welcome to try to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell.
Evening. Thanks for your thoughts. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked a couple of the others, interested in your take on binding, non-binding, long-term, short-term, that type of thing, which is a decision I have to make.
Well, the intention of the movement right now is to set a framework, a baseline in our city. So we start by educating and gathering support of our community. So it starts at our community. Ultimately, the goal is to grow that community into the larger Canadian diaspora. So all Canadians can through their own grassroots community efforts, come up with the same kind of an attitude, an aspiration. But the end game is to provide an amendment to the Canadian Constitution that has many legal and financial ramifications, but that's our Canadian Constitution, and with that comes all the pieces that come with that, all the problems and the aspirations. But our intention is to, as best we can, move Canada in that direction, starting right here in Regina.
Thank you. I'll just react a little bit and again ask a question. So I think everybody's been very respectful about the end game, and I appreciate that very much. That's not always the case here, just so you understand.
Sure.
So I appreciate that up front. So one of the things I have to look at, and I'm looking for your view, is so what's the legal impetus that I have to be aware of for my community? Do you have a thought on that?
At the moment, this is not legally binding, but it sets the stage for that to happen ultimately. If there is an amendment to the Constitution, then that will come in at that point. But between now and then, we have time, and we can think about this, and we can discuss it. We can have conversations, and we can move together towards making that happen.
Thanks for your
We have time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much. I've appreciated your comments and the forthrightness of your comments, particularly as you're a businessman. I want to suggest or ask you about a hypothetical. And I want to just preface this by saying being a councillor is really hard work because we have to make hard choices.
Sure.
Imagine that this declaration and many other declarations arrive and the Constitution is ultimately changed. Because as you said, frankly, that's where your movement wants to go. And imagine an environmental issue is brought under the new Charter of Rights and an order is made against the City of Regina requiring it to take drastic financial actions to say, move the rail yards or something, whatever. how would the business community feel about the kind of taxes that we would have to impose to achieve that environmental standard imposed on non-elected people by judges using the charter?
Well, elected or Canadians would actually change the charter, not judges. The amendment formula would be done by the citizens of Canada, so those would not be judges. Again, I don't have a direct answer for that question other than we have time. So Canada, Saskatchewan, we all would have a voice in how that would be created and however this ultimate idea of the constitutional change might come about. So I would assume that if the rail yards had to be moved, there would be a proper due course to show why that is the case. And there would be due process to deal with that, as there are for any other conditions that have to be addressed from a higher authority, I guess.
Thank you very much. The due course under that scenario would be a charter challenge, would be litigation.
Could be.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wouldn't be the first one, though.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. No other questions? Councillor Murray.
Sorry, thanks, Your Worship. It was just one of the last comments that came up that struck me that I had to think about it. So, Mr. Brensfield, thanks very much for taking the question. The reference was to moving rail yards. There's been movements to try to do that over the years, but we've also had just recently, we all recognize that the sewer treatment plant going ahead is a pretty major accomplishment and major achievement to making a more sustainable and better environment. You'd agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Were you aware how we got to the stage to have to upgrade that sewer treatment plant?
No, I don't know the specifics, but there was federal push for it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
The federal government, there's one signature across the line that came to us as municipalities across Canada demanding that we upgrade them. Do you know how much money was provided by the federal government to assist in making that happen?
I'm guessing none.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So therein lies some of
the
big challenges that we face as municipalities.
Yes.
You agree that going back to your taxpayer every time the federal government says to you it's time for you to upgrade something can be pretty taxing in another
But
form.
maybe if we had more of a conversation and were more directly involved with our government, maybe if we were all more engaged with our governments, we would see a lot of those things coming and we would have greater input in terms of how that would unfold.
Yeah,
so maybe what you're speaking to is my apathy.
It probably does rely more so on the rest of the citizens across Canada than
Yes.
the elected officials, and I agree with that. So thank you very much, and thank you.
Almost getting toward debate here. But
Yeah,
we
no, I don't want to. My apologies. Thank you.
I'm meant to be debating. No other questions? You can return to the gallery. Thank you very much for
thank you.
answering
Thanks very
questions. Amy Snyder is the next delegation. If you could as well identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing me the time to speak. Thank you as well for all the hard work that you do, and I am very aware that the environment is already one of the many priorities that you put your mind to, and that it must be a very taxing, balancing act to please everyone. I'm here today with a very small statement just to tell you about my priorities. My priority in life is to provide a healthy, safe environment for my family in the short and long term. I'd like to see Regina take steps to ensure that this will be possible for me to do. My children and my children's children, children across our province and country, deserve this right. It is in fact our responsibility as adults to do everything in our power to protect them, as I'm sure you all feel and would agree to. Unfortunately, the world that our children and their children will inherit from us is going to have environmental dangers and risks if we do not act wisely now. And I know, as I said, that you are acting as wisely as you can, and I do appreciate that. The word priority has come up in others' speeches, and I would just like to ask that you consider that with this declaration, we are making a statement that we will place even more priority on the environment and protecting our children. Without an environment, there would be no economy, there would be nothing, and that saddens me. The thought of that keeps me up at night. And so I thank you again for your time, and I take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, yeah, thanks a lot for coming for your presentation. Have you been involved with the organizing piece of the Blue Dot campaign at all?
I have unfortunately not been as involved as I'd like to. I've been a member since David Suzuki came and rolled into town a year ago or so. I do my part as much as I can. I have not been involved in organizing the movement, though, no.
Okay. So just to speak then to your own experience, I presume you're an environmentally conscious citizen.
I do as much as I can, and I do like to tell people that it is never an all or nothing situation. I do what I can. I hope and expect that others do what they can. I cannot do it all.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers, questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the
Thank
gallery.
you.
Thank you very much for that. Our last group here is Brooke Longprey, and you can see she's actually only saying that be here to answer questions. Otherwise, it would be simply receive and file. So, firstly, I'll do a motion to receive and file the communication. Okay. Seconder, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Just for a moment, are there any questions? Because you didn't. I mean, I don't want to stop you from coming forward. If you wanted to say something, you certainly can do that. But your leader just indicated you would answer questions, that's all. So if you want to come forward and speak for a few minutes, sure. Please do. Please come forward. Just identify yourself, who you represent, and you have 5 minutes like any other delegation to speak.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Brooke, and I am just a concerned citizen. I'm actually not a citizen of Regina, but I did grow up here. And my son and my sisters and my family all live here. So I am here on behalf of them, as well as everybody else who basically is uninformed about the big elephant in the room in terms of climate change and why we're all standing here and trying to move to a more sustainable future. And I would ask for your official endorsement to basically set an expectation and to ensure that there's a merger of protection of the environment that is in line with a municipal strategic plans that you have. Awareness of the environment, I think, is generally increasing among people of all ages, in that we have really a vested interest to ensure that future generations will prosper in our communities. And linking environmental rights requires strategy. And there will be challenges. And there will be financial limitations and legal implications. But I think generally people ultimately are trying to do what they can. And this would be a step forward to allow those types of things to happen. And there'll be many questions as to how we unroll something of this nature on a provincial level and on a federal level. But I do hope that you will consider this very seriously, in that although it is non-binding currently, we do have a responsibility to ensure that we recognize that there is a serious problem in terms of climate change, and we have the ability as leaders to step up and show the way to others who are not as fortunate and possibly don't have a voice. I have stood in front of Miller High School entire faculty and students and presented to them the information that I know about climate change. And they have no idea what's going on. No idea. So I encourage you to help the leaders, the business leaders, the federal and provincial responsibilities that need to go forward to ensure that we have a clean environment, clean air, and clean water, clean food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, there may be some questions of council. Any questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. And now we'll go forward with the motion itself. And Councillor Fraser, you move this, so I'll give you the floor first, and we'll take speakers as we ordinarily do on any other report or motion. The floor is yours, and for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, really excited to be here. Thanks so much for so many people showing up. This is a long time coming, and a lot of excitement, not only here in Regina but across the country. So the motion that I brought forward here tonight, I sort of feel that there's two big parts to it. One, as has been mentioned, it's a call on the provincial and federal government to ultimately lead to a change to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which now, since April 17th, 10 days after my birthday, 1982, has been a part of our Canadian Constitution. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is pretty broad, actually, in Canada, and we should be proud of the fact that it actually has some teeth. There's charters of rights and freedoms in other countries that are totally aspirational. Countries where the right to clean water is a right that's given to you in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but there's many, many people that don't have clean water. Certainly, it's not to say that all Canadians enjoy our guaranteed rights equally, but definitely the Charter of Rights and Freedoms does regularly come into play and help protect Canadians' rights. So some of our rights we have right now, we have fundamental rights, such as the freedom of conscience and the freedom of religion, democratic rights, the right to vote, mobility rights, legal rights such as the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And this is a nice one. You're innocent until proven guilty in Canada. It's nice in our legal system. It's not like that everywhere. We have equality rights. We have language rights. We have minority language educational rights. So certainly adding the right to a healthy environment, while it would be a big change, a significant change, it's important to know that in the grand scheme of all the rights that are guaranteed to us in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it's not a wholesale change. It's an addition of some rights to a list of many rights. It was brought up, what would the consequences be potentially to this council, or no, not this council, but to the city for this council or future councils if this change were actually be made. To be clear, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms affects our job as municipal politicians. Something like democratic rights. We're about to vote on a motion that's almost $1 million we're going to spend on a civic election. How we have to spend that money is actually, we have to adhere to the rights and freedoms of people when we decide how many, access to voting. Minority language education rates. Certainly, we have a French school system in here that is very much related, protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it's not to say we're going from a desert of not being affected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And if we were to change it, all of a sudden, it would really be a big hardship. So I think on that part of this motion, really, it's nice to have a full crowd here, but it's nice to have a full audience here tonight. But to be clear, if we were actually voting on this change happening to the Constitution, I would hope there'll be many more people here. All this is an endorsement to start the conversation for the provincial government and the federal governments to have this conversation, provincially and nationally about whether this is something that Canadians want. Ultimately, it would be a democratic decision. So through the democratic process, it really would be a decision of all Canadians. The process is not a light process. 7 times our Constitution has been changed. 4 times an amendment has been proposed and not gone through. It actually would take a vote of the House of Commons, a vote of the Senate, and it would have to be passed in 2/3 or more of the provinces that make up 50% or more of the population. So it's not a small undertaking. To change the Canadian Constitution is a very heavy deal, so to speak. Part 2 of this is really about having a conversation at a local level. I mentioned when I read the motion off the start some of the things that we would look at. The good news is that conversation has already started. I think it's happening in the community. And here tonight it's happening at Regina City Council. Some of the things listed in the motion, we're actually well underway of. I think we don't do a good enough job of telling our citizens what we're up to when it comes to some environmental pieces. It was mentioned in every report we have environmental impacts. Oftentimes there's other environmental impacts that don't show up in the environmental section of the report. They're in the report because they're efficiency issues. They're things we're doing to actually save money and do a better job of spending ultimately your money. But we don't necessarily look at them through an environmental lens. So to me, that's a really important part, is that we have that conversation here locally, is looking at some of the good work we're already doing just through a slightly different lens. And then, of course, there's lots of issues, as mentioned in the motion, that I think we can do a better job of. And I think, I think there's people hungry for us to see us do that. It's not necessarily things that we need to think of in, as expenses. Lots of times environmental issues that we can help with are actually just good planning, and in the long run, they'll save us money and time and resources and make for a better place to live. So I wholeheartedly would encourage council to support this motion. Again, Old Man Ludica has a great song that says, "Happily ever after is not the easy part." And certainly that's the key with this here, too. If we're just going to have a vote tonight on who's in favor of clean air, well, let's all put up our hand. That's fine. It's really what happens out of this. But for tonight, I think this motion we have before us is really a declaration. It's really showing the citizens of Regina that we're serious about this. And we'll have plenty of time after tonight, supposing this passes, to kind of fill in the gaps and really start having a more fulfilled conversation about the environment here in our fair Queen City. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser, for that. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight I rise full of pride that a delegation and a group of people is committed, is focused, is engaged with the community, is environmentally conscious, as the people who are here tonight are. It makes me proud to have a delegation as generous in their understanding of our city as you've been. And I'm full of pride because I know I live in a city where the environment counts to the whole population. This is an environmentally conscious city. You have only to look at the beauty of Wascana Park, referred to by a delegation earlier, as a gem, as a nature conservatory, as a place of recreation, as a place of great joy for our city. I don't want to see anything disturb the environmental integrity of Wascana Park and the other beautiful areas of our city. But I'm especially proud tonight of our City Council. I'm proud to be a member of this City Council. And I want to just list a list I prepared before tonight, but which all of you have mentioned, the kinds of environmental things that this City Council has done. Greenhouse gases. Look what our official city plan says. Now there's a declaration that we will provide direction for emission reductions. That's more than an aspirational declaration. That's in our city plan that we measure all of the things we do against. The fact that we've been recognized for reaching the 5th and final milestone in the FCM Partners for Climate Protection. We've reached the top milestone. The fact that we've got a wastewater treatment plant nearly ready that not only meets the high provincial standards for wastewater treatment, but goes above and beyond those standards and sets a standard and example for the whole country. Our recycling program that is working beyond all expectations. Our parks, our trees, community gardens, the fact that we have a new bus fleet, which is less polluting than the old bus fleet. And as Councillor Murray said and pointed out, the fact that every single briefing note that this council gets from its city administration contains a section on environmental implications. And those are the reasons why I say to you and to the City of Regina tonight that I think that this is one of the most environmentally friendly councils in this nation. I agree with the last speaker who said that she doubted whether anybody in this room was opposed to the kind of environmental aspirations that were discussed here tonight. I certainly support them, and I think we all do. The question here, though, is how best to put those aspirations into action. And that's where I have a bit of a problem. I'm worried about financial implications. What if we have to make a choice between the environment and feeding hungry children, for example? I don't know how we make those choices. I do know that elected people have to make those choices and be held accountable for those choices by the electorate. So I'm worried about financial implications. I'm worried about strategic implications. I'm worried about implementation implications. What parts of the environment do we protect in what order? Because we can't do it all at once. And I'm profoundly worried about legal implications. In my lifetime, and I remember well the adoption of the Charter, it is true that the Charter is an aspirational document, but it is a very powerful legal instrument. Sometimes I agree with the kinds of decisions that judges make applying the Charter because I think they're liberal and fair decisions. Sometimes I disagree because I think that they're not the kind of society that we want. There's been questions about chartered application in the area of health care, for example, that many people are nervous about. So I want that problem thought through. Your Worship, because all of these implications are worthy of more thought, because I don't want to jump into it too quickly, and because I care and I believe we all care passionately about the environment and want to do this right, I'm going to move that we refer this motion to the administration to report back to us on the implications and meaning of this motion.
Councillor Hawkins, I'm just wondering if you could hold that motion, because other speakers may want to speak, but do you have notice of a referral motion?
I'm happy to withhold it so others
just
can
because
speak.
other members of council may want to speak prior to that. So
I move notice that I'll move that motion of referral.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Other speakers to the report? Councillor Burnett, and then Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, would like to thank everyone for taking their time this evening and coming to our council and sharing their views. I guess there's two things I want to make sure we don't do tonight, and that's send a message that we don't care, that we're not, supportive of what we're seeing here tonight, because as all council members, we're citizens in the city. We have families, we have neighbors, we have friends, and the last thing we'd ever want to do is to send a message that we don't care about their health and safety, because as mentioned, I think we were very conscientious and we worked very hard. I'd just like to reiterate, too, that as Councillor Hawkins had mentioned, that if you look at the official community plan, it's now working its way into what we call master plans. And the master plans really get into detail. And when people are worried that if we don't sign tonight, what's going to happen? But I can reassure you over the next 25 years, we're looking at probably billions of dollars that have to be spent in our water, wastewater areas, everything else. That I, too, I guess I'm a little bit like Councillor Hawkins. I'm an old bureaucrat that was trained that before you go down a dark alley, make sure you kind of know what's at the other end when you're implementing strategies, because it can be complicated if you have to start backing up. And I was interested in the conversation, which is a better way from a management perspective for us to be able to kind of control a bit of our future with our own resources or have it imposed upon us through the courts, because I know understanding the magnitude of some of these costs can really be overwhelming, because I know we've had some near misses in the past where we've had some implications at higher levels of government had made a quick sort of political thought that it looks good if they put pressure on the municipality till they realize the cost impact, that when residents have to come up with $1 billion or $1.5 billion in 1 year, that causes chaos. And I do agree, though, with one of the presenters that I think it's good to have the conversation. I don't see us not carrying on to have the conversation. But I guess I'm like Councillor Hawkins. I really am not quite comfortable. I want to sign something that I'm not totally comfortable with. I don't know if there are issues, but just being able to have our administration kind of review it from their different professional backgrounds, contact maybe other municipalities that have had an opportunity to be engaged to see if they've come up with any issues that again, I just want to say that it's not an important issue. It's not that we're abandoning it. It's just, I think it's just a good business practice that before you sign a document, if you're not comfortable with what the outcome or what you're signing, I think we need to have that comfort and reassurance. So I guess I'm looking at possibly supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. It's wonderful to see the confirmation that this group brings to the work that the city has done, but especially to council, as Councillor Hawkins said, but also members of the administration that are here this evening. They actually carry the ball and do all of the hard work through different councils. And so for us to see this many people who actually care about the work that we're moving forward is a wonderful sign that people can be engaged in what council is doing. I too want to see how this declaration, or one that we might craft, would fit our OCP, which is the culmination of years of work, four years of work, I think, to even put this document in place. And so how would that declaration fit that OCP? and how would it fit the timelines and the master plans that we're moving forward. But it also gives you an opportunity to take a look at that OCP. I think you will be very pleased to see some of the specific goals that we have that we're moving forward. So I thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. And Councillor Fraser, I want to say thank you for bringing this forward. It was about, well, probably close to a year ago that I was approached, actually, when the Blue Dot movement came through, and I was asked, and actually at that time I had a conversation with the mayor and then city manager at that time, what would the ramifications be? And right off the top, there was some discussion about this. Obviously, this is the right thing to do. The next question is, what does it mean, and could it potentially bind the hands? And that was a challenge that we were discussing at that point, and began that process of researching and looking into it. So I appreciate you bringing this forward, bringing it to the forefront, so that we can now actually try to move forward on it. At the end of the day, I don't know that we've answered all those questions yet, but I think we're close, and I think we've got the makings of a really strong motion with what you brought forward to us. I don't know that it's perfect, because frankly there are no motions that are perfect. They always end up getting amended or changed in some way, but I think we're really close. And from an environmental standpoint, I don't think I'm any better than anybody else, but I was riding an e-bike in 2008 because I could finally get one. Now all of a sudden they're more popular. People are seeing them. They're out there. We can look at solar panels. We can put wind power. We can do these things to make ourselves more efficient, and I think, and more energy conscious, I think, as a society. The work that I do every day is trying to make things more efficient. So I can appreciate why we're doing what we're doing. At the end of the day, are these decisions that we can live with if we were to make that decision right now? And I don't know if I'm ready to do that just yet. But I am really in strong support of your motion. At this point, I'm really wavering because I'm now looking at two extremely intellectual and bright people, one that's got a motion of referral, one that's got a motion that we move forward with a crafted motion that's here today. I'm debating on where I go with that because right now, I like what you got. I like what you put down. Feeling confident. I want to hear what my colleagues have to say, so I'm going to, as I always do, wait until the very moment that the mayor asks the question before I make a decision. But I'm leaning strongly that we need to start moving forward, that we need to send a message to our federal government that there is responsibility that lies in their side, in their pocket, and we need to begin that dialogue. So I'll wait till I get asked the question before I make my decision. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Flegel.
Thanks, and let me start by saying thanks for everyone for coming out, and I like the motion, I like the referral for both reasons that were stated. I also liked, and I agree with what Ms. Schneider said about she does what she can and does her part. I look at my place and I have efficient windows, R50 insulation, high efficient water heater and furnace, turf, rocks, so no watering, composite deck and fence, blue bin supporter, and I walk a lot. So I'm doing my part. What I have a question on, though, and it always comes to mind, and I looked up the definition of a right. A right are legal, moral, ethical principles of freedom, of entitlement. So I have to ask through you, Mr. Mayor, is this a right of or a privilege? When I see it on the motion as a right, is this a right or is it legally a privilege? Because when I look at the insurance world, it's not a right to have insurance because there's things that can hamper you from getting insurance. It's a privilege deemed by corporations. So is this a right or a privilege? If I could ask this.
Not sure, Mr. Arch, if you want to try to answer that one or have your staff look at that. Pretty open-ended question.
Your Worship and members of Council, I think the intent of the motion is to anticipate through further political debate it will become a right. I would ask Mr. Wary, with his experience and context, to provide some further assessment, but that would be my overall impression.
Mr. Wary?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that's my understanding of the language in this motion is that this is being endorsed with a view to it being advanced to senior levels of government in order for this to be entrenched as a constitutional right in the Charter of Rights. So this would be, if entrenched in the Constitution and in the Charter, a right that would apply to residents and citizens of the country and would guide and limit government action at all levels if it was in violation, potentially, of those rights.
So if I could ask just an absolute pointed question, is water a right or a privilege in any context? Is it a right or a privilege?
Mr. Burry?
I don't, Your Worship, I don't think it really is narrowed down to a right or a privilege.
Okay. Okay. I'm not disagreeing with, again, I'm not disagreeing with what's here, but if this is going to go forward or it's going to be referred, we need administration or us going forward with this to understand that there is a difference between a right and a privilege, and some of these fall in the privilege state according to the world, because we have countries that they don't have water, they don't have clean air. They can't, it's not their right because people don't want them to have it, so it then becomes a privilege. So that's all I'm saying. I think at this point, I think I'm going to support the referral because I would love administration to take a hard look at this. I agree with the motion in a lot of ways, but I just want to make sure that we're going to do the right thing and put this forward with the proper documentation that we might need. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Fondura.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for everyone for coming. I am an environmentally friendly kind of guy. In my house, we've been recycling, we've been composting, we've been preserving water. I mean, we have mid-efficient furnace like yours, but we still keep the temperature down. And I want to see the world for my granddaughter to be the way I see it or the way I grew up in it. So I do appreciate the motion, the declaration, but when I started to learn about the blue dot and what that means and what that means to me as an individual, because everything comes to an individuality. It's me and then comes to my family and my children and how I teach my children, and then how I learn from others what to do. So again, right now, I'm in a quandary right now, what to do. I'm in a hot seat, a pretty, sometimes a very uncomfortable position. I'm definitely, all the delegation and everyone who's speaking about it, I relate to that. I understand what that means. But the question is, it kind of came to mind when I was reading, and I looked at the budgetary implication. What would the citizens say? The question to the administration then: what do we know about what the blue dot can do? When I hear about Montreal spilling all this stuff into the St. Lawrence, what can we do as an administration when this declaration gets passed? To Your Worship. I have a question to someone.
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, the consequence of applying a policy as advocated by this resolution would be something we would explore in detail with a referral to staff for further analysis. At a minimum, right now, I would imagine it would establish some parameters that we would use in a variety of circumstances, as we do today in a variety of planning policy documents. So it would influence judgments about the advice we give you. It would influence the processes we use for managing relationships, for example, with vendors. Any number of different ways could be used to apply the guidance this motion anticipates. But it would be subject to direction that Council gives us and analysis that we would do, which is how best to apply it in various processes in the organization.
Thank you for that, Your Worship. So then again, I don't want to make the wrong decision here. I don't want to say no to the citizens of Regina or citizens of Saskatchewan. But at the same time, I would like to be sure. I know it's not always a guarantees and everything. So, but I can see, I was thinking about it, so when the referral comes, I'm going to think about it a little bit more to see how I want to go. So I'll reserve my decision when I hear a little bit more on the referral. Maybe there's a debate on the referral, and I'll go from there. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. It's not very often that we get to stand in here and talk about these types of motions, aspirational. It's usually we're funneled down just about dollars and cents. So, Sean, thanks for bringing it forward. And it's an informed, detailed presentation. I appreciate that. It's also not often that we get such a respectful group of people, young people as well as mature people forward. And I don't want to dissuade you. I appreciate your thoughts and your comments, and I think it's been a wholesome debate. I'm going to tell you why I'm concerned, and I'm going to tell you why I'm going to support the referral motion. So whether I should say it this way or not, but I spent 12 days in Christmas in Victoria, and I read the paper every day. And every day in the paper, there were at least 8 or 10 letters to the editor, all against the notion of a wastewater treatment plant for the area. There are 300,000 people there, and they continue to dump raw sewage into and they're supposedly going to get a whole whack of money from the federal and provincial government. They don't care. And I know reference made in Montreal, can talk about Halifax and all that kind of stuff. And those things bother me. So if I sign on to something and then we don't do it, then I think that's very two-faced, and I can't live with that. So I'm going to tell you why I'm in favor of the referral motion. One, you have me. You didn't have me coming into the meeting, but you have me now. But I need to make an informed decision. I need to understand the implications. It's been addressed by many others. I just need to understand. I'm assuming the referral motion will read implications for the city of Regina. That's what I'm assuming. So I need to understand that. Two, I think it gives an awful lot of time to engage our community, not an awful lot of time, but some time, to engage our community in this debate, and perhaps there'll be more of you that will come. But at this point in time, I can't say no to this, but I need to understand the implications. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. So there's all been speakers till we get to the motion, but I'm going to have a few words. So Councillor Young, can you please take the chair?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to join the rest of my colleagues in council saying this has been a very respectful and very interesting, very positive discussion tonight. So I thank the delegations, those in the gallery, for listening, being reasonable, rational, empathetic, and very understanding, and for members of council as well. I think we're all united in the intent, the high-level intent of what Blue Dot wants to do, what is being asked tonight. I don't think anybody in this table said they didn't like what was being said at all. And I think that's very good. Very respectful conversation. And I would say that if the motion to refer passes, this is still a very positive event. I'm going to support the referral for a couple of reasons that I think are quite important that has not been mentioned. And the wastewater treatment plant here is a good example of that. And this is maybe not known by the delegation, and that's fine, but I'll say it anyway. Typically, with municipal governments, we receive downloading of responsibility for new programs, higher regulations, without the resources to do that. And that's not necessarily the concern of the delegations tonight. But we typically have that issue. We are the level of government least able to affect change, but with the greatest responsibility, because our services are here in front of us day by day. Garbage collection, water, sewer, all those things are our responsibility to provide the service. So in order for us to be reasonable, rational, and forward-thinking, it's really important that we understand the implications. And so the spirit, the aspirational comments, who could possibly say no to those? Who could possibly do that? But we as the government must understand those implications. What does it mean for us? And how does it tie our hands or not? What are our choices? So I'm hoping that the mover of the motion, if I could speak to Councillor Hawkins for a moment on this. Councillor Hawkins? Just about some being clear on the motion itself, that it would actually speak to the financial legal, environmental implications for the city of Regina, just to be more clear on what exactly we're speaking to. I hope that may be the clarity on this. Madam Chair, I also want to speak to the issue of the understanding of what we have been doing as a community, and Councillor Hawkins raised those points, that is understood of how far we've moved forward as well. So we walk together on this journey. That is understood we've done many things. Our official community plan, what are we entitled to do, what we must do. So I'm hoping that the referral motion will actually see the coming together of what we've done with what is aspired to by the motion itself. So I agree with the motion, but I and members of council, I suggest, have an obligation to think through what does that actually mean. The final point that I'm wrestling with, and I'll be very frank about this, is that this motion, while it begins to be aspirational, is actually a legally binding document. That is the aspiration of the delegations. And that is significant. We must understand those implications. Doesn't mean they're bad implications, but eyes wide open to understand. So I will support a referral motion on the basis that we have a report back from the administration, not just in the implications, but what we've been doing, too, as a community. It's very important that people understand that. The report comes back, and we've done so many very good things. We have a long way to go, too, but we've done some great things. I will support the referral motion. Councillor Hawkins, on referral motion. And I remind members of course, and members of the gallery that referral motion is not debatable.
Your Worship, I just want to add.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to add, deal with the clarification points that Councillor O'Donnell and you raised. I'd suggest for clarification that the motion read, referred to report back to the Executive Committee following which City Council on the financial, legal, environmental, and other relevant implications of the motion. So it would read, refer this motion to the administration for a report back to Executive Committee on all of the financial, legal, environmental, and other relevant implications of the motion for the city. My understanding is it would go from the Executive Committee to the City Council, as is usually the case.
That's referral motion. Are we all understanding the motion?
Just on a point of order, just so that people understand, the kind of debate that we can have at Executive Committee is a little different than we can have on Council,
yes, but
it still comes back to that's all.
That's okay. Okay, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The motion's carried. Thank you very much, everyone in the gallery, for your participation and consideration of the report. We'll now move on to the Executive Committee report. We have the 2016 municipal election. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I bring forward CR 16.4. Elections are the pillar of the democratic process. It's the formal decision-making process choosing individuals who will hold office. And it's important to make access as easy as possible and to ensure accessibility for residents. And so these recommendations refer to centralized polling stations that have adequate parking and accessibility, advanced polls, mobile polls, mail-in ballots, and special polls for residents. So the recommendation from Executive Committee that the use of mobile and special polls for serving voters at the institutions defined under Section 29 of the Local Government Election Act 2015 be approved, that the regular polling areas, polling places, and special polls as outlined in Appendix A be approved, that the special, advance, and mobile polls as outlined in the body of the report be approved and held during the operating hours established under Appendix B, that the rates of remuneration for election officials summarized in Appendix C be approved, that the voters be registered at the polls on Election Day or at the advance polls on the date set for voting in advance of Election Day, that the names of candidates on the mayor and councillor ballots be listed in alphabetical order by surname, and that the requirement for criminal record checks for candidates in municipal elections not be approved.
Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Dowell? Okay. Any debate or discussion on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Young on the out-of-scope wage increase.
I bring forward CR 16.5, out-of-scope bargaining unit recommendation. It ensures that the out-of-scope compensation remains competitive, and it supports the City of Regina's need to attract, recruit, and retain high-valued out-of-scope employees. This recommendation from the Executive Committee that out-of-scope employees receive a 2% general wage increase effective January 1st, 2016. I move concurrence.
Thank you for that. Seconder, please. Okay, Councillor Hawkins, any discussion on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Planning Commission, Councillor O'Donnell on Laneways and Garden Suites.
I'm going to introduce this report. It is the Laneway and Garden Suites Guidelines and Pilot Project. If I could have a seconder, please.
Second, please.
Thanks. So I'll reserve my comments. I'd like to go to the administration on this for a briefing. This is an administrative document, and we'll go from there.
Ms. Harlock?
Through you, Your Worship. To give some background to this initiative, when the OCP was being created, we heard a number of times and requests that we look at opportunities to allow other forms of secondary suites within our city. Currently, secondary suites are only allowed within the existing dwellings. And so this form of secondary suite was identified also in the comprehensive housing strategy. So the objective of the Laneway and Garden Suite Guidelines and Pilot Project is to allow for laneway and garden suites that respect the character and quality of Regina's established neighborhoods and for it to be tested throughout the city. The draft guidelines have been developed through a process that included comprehensive public and stakeholder engagement, which was established clear and concise urban design recommendations to ensure that any pilot would fit within the neighborhoods that they would be going into. This was done in consultation with administration and in coordination with our multidisciplinary consultant team led by Brooke McElroy out of Toronto and in association with KGS Group. The guidelines were also supported by the project's external working group made up of concerned citizens and developers who provided detailed input and review of the guidelines, as well as members of the public who have provided input online and in person during the workshops that we've held. The guidelines, as you can see in the report, are divided into two sections: site design guidelines and building design guidelines. So there's two forms of ways that we want to regulate how these buildings are placed on the sites. So should the approval of the draft laneway and garden suite guidelines be given by council, the pilot will be used as a method of testing the guidelines on residential lots within established neighborhoods throughout the city, and will complement the two laneway housing pilot projects that we have in Greens on Gardner and Harbour Landing, which were greenfield sites that we did pilots on. So the pilots will be selected based, obviously, on the interest that we have from property owners, and because we put out a request for expressions of interest to do this, and we want to make sure we get it across the whole city so we can see how the pilot would work throughout the city and the guidelines. As I said, the laneway and garden suites are not currently permitted within the city's existing zoning regulations, so it's our hope that through these pilot projects that we'll be able to test them, evaluate them, refine them, and that new zoning regulations and tools would be developed regarding this type of use to be used on a wider basis and would be incorporated within our zoning bylaw review. So administration can answer any questions. We do have our consultant here tonight also if you have any questions for them.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Donald, do you want to begin debate on this? And we'll...
Sure, I'll mention a couple things. First of all, one of the reasons why I'm proud to be on Planning Commission is because they work hard. And so when we had the guidelines before us, they were asking questions about page 69 and 89 and so on. So they did some depth and did some investigation, and they're fine with this. I want you to understand that. But I'll give you some provisos of where there are issues, I think, that may develop. And then I'll ask a couple questions. So in terms of the guidelines, I'm going to give just some quick highlights so people understand what is talked about. One is permission, 1 secondary suite per property, so you can't have multi, and a maximum of 2 bedrooms in that suite. The location, the orientation, and coverage is a part of the notion here. It's located in the rear of the property, must minimize shadows, et cetera. Parking, minimum of 1 stall per unit. Access, no front yard parking. It has to be on a hard surface, et cetera. Setbacks and separation distance, minimum of 5.0 meters between primary dwelling and laneway suite, minimum of 4.0 meters between primary dwelling and garden suite. Site and laneway landscaping, minimum of 30% soft landscaping on the site. Utilities and servicing, engineering servicing plan is required. Waste, recycling, and so on must be on site. Snow storage included in the plan. Grading and drainage, site grading and drainage plans are required. Uses, height, and massing must contain cooking and toilet facilities, maximum of 2 bedrooms, etc. Materials and articulation, rooftops and dormers, entrances, outdoor space, meters, and waste storage. These are all part of the overall plan. So why planning would like this is because we think that there is a real outline as to what is possible, and we expect that there are a group of people, because it came out in the public consultation, who are actually interested in doing this. So you'll notice that we have nobody in the gallery to speak against or for this at this point in time. It may be such that when some of these start coming forward and looking for 10 to 20, that people may, once it's in their neighborhood or beside them, they may have a different view. But going into this, it's broad, it's prescriptive, and I think that there are many ways that this can work. It also is a way for us to meet that target of 30% infill. This was one of those directions, correct me if I'm wrong, that came out of our OCP public deliberations, the things that we've endorsed. So not only the 30%, but that laneway suites were something that were good. So I don't have any questions, and I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dow. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Fraser?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks a lot. This is an exciting opportunity. First off, kudos to the administration for the public consultation on this. I was able to take part in a number of the infill open houses, and I feel like they were well attended, and the product before us is definitely a product of people's input, so that's great. We've run 2 pilot projects in new neighborhoods. Could you just elaborate for the record on what the feedback has been from those pilot projects? Thanks.
Ms. Warlock?
Through your worship, at this point, we actually haven't done the consultation to do the evaluation as of yet. Greens on Gardner had 11 sites that were approved. 8 have been built on and constructed. And in Harbour Landing, there was 20 sites approved, but there's only been 2 that have been built at this stage. So it's too early in the process to do the evaluation, but we will be doing that next year, doing our consultation with the landowners and the neighbors within the area. That had different regulations, slight tweaks in each, as we want to be able to evaluate all of the different regulations to see what's best for Regina.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other speakers on the report? Councilor Fundura.
Just have a question to your worship, administration, about the two pilot project. I'm looking at snow removal or managing laneways, and what was discovered, or what was found, and how do we deal with that, your worship?
Ms. Warlock?
Through your worship, at this point, we haven't gone into detail. I don't believe we've had any complaints with regards to that at this point. When the pilots were put together for the 2 greenfield sites, we worked with operations to look at all of those issues with respect to ensuring that there was enough clearance with respect to the alleyways and those sorts of things. So that was all taken into consideration with respect to parking and that, so that there was no obstructions in the laneways.
So that was through, with your worship, that was through the open houses that what you had? Is that where that information came from?
Ms. Warlock?
Through your worship, the first two pilots, we did that internally with developers that came with us. So we worked with that, and then of course we did this was because this was specific to existing residential areas, so we did take into consideration within the guidelines, those sorts of things will be looked at when the proposals come forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fandera. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Young, can you take the chair for a moment?
Your Worship.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add my voice of thanks to the administration for a job well done. This began as a bit of a polarizing issue, and members of council will know over many years there has been some infill examples of that didn't sort of fit the mark, and we had some pushback on that. But this has really brought us to a whole new level of consultation. And I follow what happened at Planning Commission. Certainly I was aware and attended early on some of the public consultation that went on. And I know that we listened very well. And the points that have been brought forward, and Council Down spoke to some of the regulations that are here, very much speak to understanding the implications of infill in the back lane, what's possible, what's doable, what fits the character of the neighborhood where you're going to be going. So to the administration, thank you for doing a great job on getting it right. And the measure of how good it is, there's no one in the gallery. That's important. There may be applications in the future where someone may say something, but from my perspective, we got this right. This is a key element of what we've been speaking to in terms of our housing portfolio of issues to deal with. How we find innovation and ways to maximize space in our existing communities. Very well done. Very much supportive of this one, and I'm looking forward to the actual applications that come forward. To the administration, the report speaks to the anticipated number, just how we got to those numbers of what could be constructed or could come forward. Just a discussion of how we got to those numbers, and have we heard from the development community they want to have this?
Through your worship, it is something of interest to the development community. I think because it's a pilot, we don't want to do too many all at once. Harbor Landing we had a maximum of 20, so we're hoping that throughout the whole city that 20 would be a sufficient number. Now, as you indicated, it will depend on how many applications come forward, and we'll deal with that once we put out the request, which will be the first week of February, next week.
Thank you very much. Other speakers? Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. You did mention there wasn't a lot of folks in the gallery, and I agree there isn't, but John Robinson's here from Robinson Design, and he's also a large fan of Laneway Homes, so he is here. So again, appreciate you being here. I just wanted to recognize.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Very good. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We will go to Planning Commission. Councilor O'Donnell.
There's an application for a discretionary use proposed restaurant. Address is 860 Winnipeg Street. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Councilor Flegel.
Yeah, it's Tim's. So this is a very busy corner on Winnipeg and 4th Avenue there. And so we obviously looked at some of the things that we've talked about before in terms of drive-through and so on. So, for example, one of the requirements is that it have 9 stalls. This location is going to have 69 stalls. So we think that there's going to be lots of room for that lineup drive-through plus the restaurant and so on, and expect this to be a busy location. We looked at the entrances, Winnipeg Street and so on. I think we've made a few adjustments in our discussion, and we're fine with what's going on here, so we recommend concurrence.
Okay. Discussion? Councilor Flegel.
Thanks. Don't usually ask this question, but why so many parking stalls? Usually it's the other way around. There are minimum. So why is there 69 instead of the usual 10 to 15?
Ms. Horlock?
Through you, Your Worship, I think when the proponents, this type of business, they know that they need additional stalls and additional stacking distances just to accommodate their customers.
So how much over the limit are they, and are we going to set a precedent for the future Tims or whoever's that we want this type of thing, or?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, the required is 9. They are proposing 69, so 60 stalls over. Our regulations are set at the minimums, so I don't think it would be at this point setting any sort of precedent. If it fits within the site, I think it's something that we would consider.
Thanks. I like the idea of this because we know that there's issues with some of the Tims in Regina for parking and backing things up. And with the busy intersection that this is going to be, Winnipeg is busy, Ross Avenue is busy. This is a great thing because it keeps them off the, as we say for the kids, keeps them off the streets. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other discussions? Councillor Murray?
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just thinking about Councillor Flagel's comment, but with the 43-seat restaurant, I'm glad they're going to have lots of parking because that's a large restaurant. When you include all the people that are coming through on the drive-through, you need that extra room. So I'm definitely in support, and I don't mind my Tims. So excited. Thank you.
Good to know. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move on to bylaw and related reports. The Executive Committee report. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I bring forward CR 16-8, Civic Employee Superannuation and Benefit Pension Plan. This amends the long-term disability plan bylaws to include Mobius as a new participating employer in the plan. It has received consent from the Civic Pension and Benefits Committee, and this allows existing City of Regina pensions and disability staff to maintain their existing benefits when they become employees of Mobius effective April 1st, 2016. I move concurrence to the recommendation.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Hawkins moves that. Any discussion or debate on that? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Young. Councillor Young.
Your Worship, I bring forward 16-9. This changes the committee bylaw terms of reference for the Finance and Administration Committee, consistent with the pension plan changes that Council approved on October 26, 2015. One of the new pension plan governance structure goals was to reduce the role of City Council in exercising final approval of fiduciary changes to the pension plan. This recommendation meets that goal, and this change removes the requirement that a councillor from the Finance and Administration Committee be appointed to the Pension and Long-Term Disability Plan Administrative Boards.
Do you have a seconder for that, please?
No, I have a second recommendation.
Oh, a second one, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The second recommendation names 2 members who currently sit on the administrative board to see if they will sit on the LTD plan. I understand that they have been contacted and that they have accepted, so could we change that? And there is the new amendment, that Barbara March Burwell and Tanya Lestage be appointed to the Regina Civic Employees Long-Term Disability Plan Administrative Board, and that they continue to hold office until their successors are appointed. I move concurrence.
Good. Seconder for that, please. Okay. Councillor Hicks moves concurrence. Discussion or debate? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we have the bylaws. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaws number 2016-3 and 2016-4 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaws 2016-3 and 2016-4 be read a second time.
Any questions? Comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that Council hereby consents to bylaws number 2016-3 and 2016-4 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Burnett, that bylaws number 2016-3 and 2016-4 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Flagel, seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.